What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rally Cruise podcast, where we dig deep to reach high. Of course, it's always progress through action. I am your co-host, Payron Baxter.
And I'm your co-host, Ram Sandoval. How y'all doing?
Rom, as always, brother, the days tick down. We are 500, I'm about to say 600, 568 days until midterms.
Will
How do
we
you
make
feel about it
it?
this time? Will
Will we
we?
make it?
Shall we? I don't think it may not be in the cards. It might have been our last one last time.
It's relative, right?
But
So, what does making it mean, right? Does it mean
good
more
point.
disenfranchisement? Does it mean that we're up in Guantanamo or El Salvador? What does that mean? I don't know.
I
Um,
don't know.
but
I mean, every time a car like rides past my house, I'm like, who is that? Like I'm always like kind of like, hold on, because I stick out like a sore thumb in my neighborhood. Not a lot of folks have locks or have black families. And like today we're doing gardening, and I was playing some Bone Crusher. So you outside the club and you feel like I'm a punk. And folks were like, what is he playing over there? Is that? I'm like, but then after that came Shallow from A Star Is Born. Lady Gaga and what's his face? The guy that he plays Rocket Raccoon. I mean, anyway, point being, it's like okay, they're going back and forth. I don't know when to call HOA on them. Is it when I hear Kryptonite, or is it when I hear Lincoln Park? They don't know what's going on, Rom. That's what we was doing today. That's what we was doing, brother.
gotcha,
How was your
gotcha.
weekend?
Weekend was good. Celebrated my wife's birthday. The birthday was
Oh,
on
nice.
Friday. We went to Yunta, which is a
Oh,
Peruvian restaurant.
yes.
So
We've
in
been there.
Charlotte, yeah, we spent some time in Peru a couple years, 3 years ago, and we loved the food there. So we did that little celebration. And then
Did you guys take the picture?
we did take a picture of the food. I mean, like, is that what
No,
you mean?
like because no, I think they come around. I'm thinking of maybe another
You
place,
might be
but
thinking of something. I'm like,
because we've been to Utah as well. But yeah, it's pretty good. I'm sorry.
and then my daughter had a little performance on Friday at school at her daycare. So yeah, that was a pretty good weekend. But yeah, if you're
Uh,
listening, like, subscribe, follow, share with 5, 10, 20 of your friends.
100,
All
a million people.
right, everyone you know. So what do we got tonight?
Well, tonight I have a very exciting guest coming on, or we have a very exciting guest coming on. Let me not take all the credit for this because it is us that has drawn this moth to this intellectual flame. We have Franklin Ellis, Dr. Franklin Ellis, who is the owner of Frank Interactions, intellectual, academic, someone who has consulted for many a Fortune 500 organization, a top tier leader in knowledge. And I heard about him through when he consulted for my wife's organization. I just heard from many different people because I know folks that work there. They're like, man, this guy Franklin he's amazing. When I heard this, and it's like he had me reshape my mind. I said, okay. When we started this show, I said, we got to get him on eventually. And I was twisting my wife's arm and twisting my wife's arm, like, can you reach out to Franklin? Can you reach out to Franklin? And she finally reached out to him after like the 100th time because she don't listen to me because she's an independent woman. She don't care about me. And we finally got him on the show. So let's bring on Dr. Franklin Ellis. Everybody, Franklin Ellis. What's up,
Really?
man?
Nothing. Good evening. Listen, Payron, you are like the best hype person. Like I just around with me. I appreciate that introduction. I'm doing well. How y'all doing?
Doing well, my friend. Doing well. I mean, that's all I am. I'm just all hype. Ron, you tell me, what do you think?
Uh, yeah, I mean, you're the energy man, right? So
All hype.
you're the guy that's jumping around at the concert, right?
That's it. I'm Flavor
Like
Flav, baby. Flavor Flav. Well, Franklin, do you want to go by Franklin or Dr. Ellis? Like, what is your moniker you want us to go by?
Yeah, Franklin is fine. It's my name. It has done me well. I'm somewhere between 25 and death and closer to death. So Franklin
Okay.
is good,
All
right?
right.
I only use doctor when I got to check somebody.
I, okay. Well, if you got to check us, feel free to check on, my friend. Feel free to check on. Well, Franklin, if you don't mind, again, I just know about you. We just met prior to recording. My wife and her coworkers are very familiar with you. They love you. They're probably tuning in right now. And but if you, for our other folks, because we do have reach outside North Carolina, and you're in South Carolina, correct?
Yes.
So we have reached outside of the states. Folks across the country listen to us, and hopefully internationally at a certain point. So if you don't mind, give us a little bit of your background, who you are, and introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, appreciate that. So I would say I come to this conversation as a person who is Black, a Black male, cisgendered male. I come to this conversation today as a person who is a part of the LGBTQI plus community.
Mhm.
I am a proud Southerner, done a lot of work to be a proud Southerner, coming up. For me, when people heard you from the South or you had a Southern accent, right, they automatically associated that with not being intelligent. Um, and so I lost my accent, things like that. But now I'm very proud to be from the South. I think there's just a way that we navigate the world um, with a lot of grace. And I come to this conversation as a person who grew up military. So my father,
Mm,
military background, moved all over, which gave me a love for travel, a love for people, a love for culture. I really think my childhood and bringing up in that gave me my purpose. And I tell people my purpose is to assist people with being better people by being better to people.
mm.
And
I
I get
love
to
that.
live that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I live it every day, right? Education background, I graduated from Coastal Carolina University, CCU, Camp Coastal, some years ago with a major in psych and philosophy. Then I moved to Ohio. Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio is where I did my master's in mental health counseling with an emphasis in family systems. Got bored of the snow, moved out to LA where I worked at Cal State Northridge, good old CSUN. Then got bored and was like, what do I do next? I'll go
Mm,
back to school. So I got my doctorate from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology in Westwood in marriage and family therapy.
mm.
Um, and all along, I've always done DEI work, right? I've always done inclusion work. Again, that is my purpose in life is how do we just teach people to be better to each other?
Right.
It goes a long way. And and so I started doing this full time. So I've been in higher education for 20 plus years and then was in residence life. Switched out of that, shift into what we used to call multicultural, right?
Right. Right.
Affairs. Uh, Back in like 2015-ish or so. And so yeah, that's a little bit about who I am.
Awesome. So you've been all over the place. I mean, it's funny because Rom's from Chicago. I'm from Pittsburgh originally. So and then I think a lot of us all have our roots, and as you said earlier, in the South, right? The majority of us are still concentrated in the South, right? Because the Great Migration, a lot of us left, but still a lot of us stayed here, right? So just to hear your trajectory and how you've moved around, I think is quite illustrative of how kind of our history of Black people are in this
Mhm.
country, right? Like how we do migrate to go to where the getting is good, if you will, right? Or going to where there's opportunity for us. So that's very interesting. And you said you're a military kid. What branch was your father, correct?
Yeah, my dad did 22 years. He was in the Army. So I
Army.
believe when he retired, he was a sergeant major. Yeah. So pretty dope. He had a really great
Yeah.
career.
And what other countries have you been to because of that?
Yeah, so I lived in Germany for 3 years, right? And
Hmm.
then the rest was just around the States. And then, we were talking about this connection to the South. And part of the reason why I came back was when I got my doctorate. I wanted to, as a Black man with a doctorate from the South, I came
Hmm.
back, I went back to Coastal to work for a little while. And it was because of that, because I wanted Black students to be able to see someone, to know that it's achievable, right? And that they
Right.
can do as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, well, yeah, thank you for that intro to yourself, because I think it's important for folks to know who you are. Because, again, as I heard about you, it was through your work within DEI, and you kind of alluded to that, where it was before that it was multiculturalism, we've noticed it's taken different shapes over the years and it's taken different colors and sounds, but now we're living in the time of DEI, and dare I say, the time of anti-DEI, right? I don't think
Mhm.
anybody is unaware of this, but I think it's a real marker of kind of where we are as a society of what we do want to amplify. So, if you know, my first question here is, given the backlash and rollback of DEI efforts in many of the institutions, as we know, like Walmart's and Targets and these places that have said, oh, once the administration's changed, that we're not going to have any DEI work. What do you see the current state of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this moment? Like, what is your personal perception of that?
Ooh, you came out hitting hard, right? um, just in watching it, I feel like I want to be like Oda Mae Brown and be like, DI, you in danger, right? Like
Yeah,
it
you in
is,
danger, girl. Right.
right? It is, depending on where you are. I think there's some institutions that have like Costco, right? 10 toes down, we're going to keep doing it. We do have those, like you mentioned, Walmart, who are getting rid of it. We have others who are doing risk mitigation and saying, how do we be compliant with whatever this political moment is, this administration is asking, but still care for those in our community that are being attacked, right? And so I think DEI is extremely weakened because it is being dismantled quickly and not necessarily based off of this law that has changed, but just based off of perception, right? Like
Right.
at some point, it has become, since January, anathema, right? Like it is almost seen as this curse. It is like strictly disliked. And so people are running from that in a survival mode for some institutions. When we see the freezing of Title IX funds, right? So that is federal aid, student aid, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it's disheartening to see all of that happening. And I think what we really have to explore is why is a lot of that
Right.
happening? Is it under attack? Why is it illegal when nothing about what you do in DEI is illegal? When we are doing equity work and equality work, and we are doing work that is created to welcome everyone, right? How is that illegal? And so, in thinking about that, I have to explore that. And exploring it, what I say is DEI does a lot of things, but I think what it does really well is it pushes back on power, right? It pushes back on power in such a way that it helps people have a more critical and sophisticated consciousness about systems, right? Systems that are rooted in oppression, be that institutional, structural, or systemic. And when we start to ask questions and we are critical of that power, we then start to dismantle that power. And I think the reason why it's been so weakened and they're pushing so hard to dismantle it is because we want power likes to stay where it is, right? And so if we don't have people questioning it, then we get to stay in it and keep it.
Yeah, I think the Frederick Douglass quote, power concedes nothing without demand. The thing about it is they know, I think, dare I say this settler colonial project, this criminal enterprise known as the United States of America has been dealt a death blow, right? And I think they're very aware of that. Right now, the average person who's below the age 18 is brown. And something tells me when that person turns 19 or 18, they're not going to be white. And I think there is this fear of this, and something you said earlier, like the idea that um, the stories that we tell ourselves, or the idea of um, who this country wants to be, or this idea of equality being illegal, that is illegal, right? In a settler colonial state, right? You can't have the savages outnumber the civilized, right? You can't have the heathens overtake those who are honorable, right? So there's this colonial mindset that is, I think, very pervasive in that is kind of flattened in our political discourse, where it's kind of
Mhm.
like, well, one side they just want meritocracy, and the other side wants all this woke stuff and DEI agenda, which is very simplistic to understand. But as James Baldwin said, if you don't know what happened behind you, you're not going to know what's going on around you. And a lot of folks don't have that shared collective.
Mhm.
Um, and I think this is very important as we try to unpack the idea of the importance of social structure. You said that earlier, right? Because social structure, that is who we are to other people, right?
Mm.
The
Mm.
slaves, the citizens, they fought the Revolutionary War, the colonized, the resistors, the Maroons, right? These are all ideas that we didn't come up with. These are not narratives that are ours. And it brings about the importance of agency. And I think DEI really helps embolden the idea of agency. That when
Mhm.
we come into a corporate space, when we come into an academic space, when we come into a societal space that was built, that preceded us before any of the three of us were born and put together times three, we are always going to come in as disruptors, right? With our own stories, with our own narratives, with our own ideals. And that's what they don't want, right? Is this idea of having agency. And I think and there's that fear of not allowing folks who have never had a story be able to tell their story in places like, hey, how this impacts me in the workplace, how this impacts me in school, how this impacts me in this neighborhood. that then becomes synonymous with an attack. That then becomes synonymous with you want to erase me, but at the same time, they don't understand themselves. And I'm talking about the white majority here because we have to be honest here. The white majority, they don't understand themselves either because they're not rooted in anything. The idea of being white in this country is always to erase your Scottishness, to erase your Frenchness, to erase your Britishness. In fact, you have to negotiate that away to become white. And now those of us who have a history of being Africans or being indigenous or being Latino or being whatever, that becomes a threat. And I think as we try to amplify those things in the workplace or in society, that becomes scary to a lot of people.
Yeah, I think what we hit on there, if we right, talked about colonialism there, you talked about like having this agency. I think what also happens is our bodies have always been political, right?
Mm,
Mm,
We enter in spaces, I don't have to say anything. My simple presence
mm,
is powerful and political in these spaces, right? And so I think when I look at where DEI is and how it's been polarized, I would say a lot of it is really attack on higher education itself. Why is that? Again, when we talk about helping people develop a critical and sophisticated consciousness to be able to think for self, have
mm,
agency, have
mm,
choice. And when you listen to, I've heard, it said like a lot of universities are now these training grounds for liberal indoctrination. And I say, actually, what it is it is not about liberal indoctrination. It is about liberation indoctrination,
that's
right?
right.
And so if I can attack that which gives us liberation, I then have control and power, and you no longer have agency, right? And
Hmm.
then I'm able to place you where I believe, think, feel that you should be, and I get to define who you are.
Mm. And I think that's the problem with when the idea of, hey, we all can have equality, right? And you don't lose
Mhm.
out anything too. In fact, you get something too. But what they hear, and I'm talking about the more regressive, those in power currently right now, those who don't want to have equality, what they hear is when they don't hear that you can succeed too if we all have equality. They don't hear that. What they hear is now I can't control you. And you just said that, right? Now I can't control you. And our bodies were always meant to be controlled, always. And I don't think that's really appreciated enough. I think in workspaces. I mean, what is your experience about that? I mean, you've went around the country and the world. Do you think these spaces are very appreciative of different personalities when they're coming in giving different perspectives? What do you think?
Mm, good question. I think every place is different, right? And so I think the people make the place different, and there are some folks who create or attempt to create spaces that are more inclusive, right? But I think to really answer that, we have to ask ourselves, what does inclusion really ask from us?
Mm,
And I don't think we really, yeah, even those of us who do this work, right? What does
mm-hmm,
inclusion really ask for us? And when we ask that question, for me, I'd say I have radical inclusion, right? Like there's a place for everything and everyone, right? Restorative practices, I believe in like reintegrative shame, not stigmatized shame.
right.
Um, but I also have agency in how I navigate it, right?
Mm,
And in hearing what you're saying about these spaces, I've never been one to ask people where I should be in space. I just take up space,
mm, I like
right?
that.
I think we're oftentimes asking people, can I, should I? Mm-mm. I got the same degrees, right? Maybe even more degreed up than some of you, more experience than others,
Right.
right? To this point where I'm a Black boy from the country and I still talk country, right? I don't code switch, I don't mask because I don't have to. And so I think it is not necessarily about how we're treated in those spaces. I think it is about just knowing we belong in those spaces, right? And so I know when I have walked in, felt, think, believe that I belong and not ask for my place, but take my place.
mm.
Um, Depending on the people, I've had really good interaction with it and some bad. And what I tell people all the time is just like I got this job, I can get another one, right?
Mm,
Um, so it's not about asking, it's just about being.
mm,
We're like before DEI existed, or this I don't know if I call it branding. You know, what 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 existed before DEI, and where did DEI itself come from?
Mm. I think if you ask people, you'd get different responses from that, right? I can remember before really knowing DEI, it was like multiculturalism, like multicultural affairs, things of that nature, right?
Hmm.
I think DEI came around in like the 90s or so, and it was really corporate at first. It was just corporate language that we then all took on, right? So before that, I think we also just did the work. I think it was just hard work. It was caring work. It was community work, right? You see another Black person, I'm gonna dap you up and make sure that you're good and you're taken care of. I think that's just how we as community have always navigated. And then to be able to teach it, we put words to it, right? So
Mm.
that way I can pass it down a little better to folks.
I think a lot of people perceive DEI as just this like racial handout, for black folks and like a just a affirmative action type of thing. But it's really like far more than that, right? So, for example, giving a place for a woman to breastfeed or great breast milk at work, right? A safe space, a comfortable space, and they're not like in the bathroom or whatever hiding out, or for someone to pray in a private without having to again hide in a janitor's closet, things like that. But were those things really thought of before DEI came along? Like, were people really thinking about those things, or did it become more aggressive and expansive and I shouldn't say when DEI came along, because so for me, my perception is like DEI was something that was like 2019, and then like 2020 it exploded, kind of around the George Floyd protests and things like that is kind of what I remember. And I remember corporations and things like that were hopping on like the DEI bandwagon and creating charters and things like that. But like I'm just trying to understand, like, what came additionally with this in this time period with DEI, and are these things going to exist, tomorrow without DEI per se?
Mm, mm, mhm, mm. Good question there. I think I would say DEI, as long as we have difference in a space, has always existed. Again, we may not have had language for it, right? And so I think
Mhm.
as people fought to be in spaces, right? DEI became present, right? So you have um, parental leave, right? You have people having kids, women, married couples having kids. So now we want to make sure that we both we're able to leave, keeping with the example of right, working mothers, working parents, having Black people. What are spaces where I can fully be myself, right? So I think it has always been there, as long as there's been people of difference taking and coming into spaces, right? Um, I think what will be interesting watching it go forward is we were able to openly challenge, right? And we are able to openly state what needs are and how we can improve and put measures into place that make a space more comfortable for everyone. My fear is moving forward without having that, we don't have champions in that realm anymore. And I think people start to quiet. And then, right, I think we start losing sense of self. We have less safer spaces for people. Um, so I think that is my fear with not having DEI, but having difference, right? And I think that
Yeah.
when I speak of DEI in that lens, for me, it is that ability to speak for your needs, for your wants, and then people being able to meet them, right? As long as yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. I think there's also this this is my personal opinion from just what I've been seeing. I think there's also this. I feel like some folks who found themselves to be progressive believe that DEI did go too far. They were getting corrected too much. They were being told, hey, did we all have to unlearn this stuff and the pronouns and understanding different people's lifestyles and understanding different people's experiences is a bit too overwrought and a bit too overreaching. And I think that they got I mean, so I guess like the question I'm trying to ask here is how you combat the folks who are supposedly your allies who are like, I don't know, this DEI stuff went too far. Because I think that's what laid the groundwork for it to be ripped away so quickly. Is for people that were supposedly, these were deeply held beliefs. They weren't so deeply held because they got taken away, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine by me. So how do you respond to people who are like DEI went too far?
First of all, I would say that's all inclusion theater,
Mm,
right? So when I say inclusion theater, it's sort of like the TSA. It don't do nothing, but it makes you feel a certain way, right?
Right.
So I would say you were never an ally. You practiced inclusion theater. You made it feel like you were inclusive because what you wanted was my skill, my experience. You wanted
Mm,
what I could give with having my body in there. You didn't necessarily want my full body in that space. So I would be
Mm,
careful about calling that person an ally. I think in looking at the people who say, well, it did go too far, what I would ask them to do is a lot of like reflective and self work, right? You're telling me it went too far because most likely it doesn't hit you in a way,
mm,
right? Most likely you have enough privilege and advantage in your life that, right, you get to be comfortable and walk around all day. You get to be you all day. You get to make mistakes. You don't have to speak for your whole race or your whole community, right? Um, and so when you're saying it's going too far, and I'm simply just giving you the correct language so we navigate each other with respect, that's not going too far, right? I believe in carefrontation. If I'm telling you what you're doing to me that's hurting me, it's because I value that relationship and I'm telling you to change it so we continue the relationship. So that correction, you're reading that as a correction. And again, we talk about power here, and power doesn't like to be
right,
corrected,
right.
right?
mm,
I'm correcting you really because I value the relationship we have because you say you're my ally. And if you are, then I need you to treat me in a way that makes me feel seen, heard, acknowledged, loved, and cared for. So
Mm.
that's not an overstretch. That's not an overreach. It's not an overcorrection. It's simply love.
mm. You know what? What DEI kind of reminds me of is also the Me Too movement, because it was like something. It was like holding up a mirror or trying to hold people accountable, and like you just said, kind of you know demanding respect, right? And I feel like there was people. The reaction was, "You're going too far," right? Oh, like we it used to be like in the workplace, like men could sexually harass women without repercussion, right? And probably still exists today, but I feel like a lot of people push back against
Right.
this movement of like, oh, I don't want to hear about it. You're talking about it too much. What do you mean I can't say certain things, and I can't be misogynist, like those type of things, and just holding us like, and it's I feel like DI, the reaction to DI is very similar in some ways, to that movement as well. Um,
But I know, Ron, I'm gonna pick up on that. I think
mhm,
I touched on this a little bit last episode. And the people that say this, what they're also, and to Franklin's point, what they're not considering is the context of what of the society that we live in, right? Like
mhm,
we're 99% of presidents were white men. 90% of CEOs are white men. The majority of people that win Oscars and Grammys are white people. 90+% of judges are white. 80% of attorneys are white. Most middle management positions are still held by white men. White men still get the highest amount on the dollar. Like, so all of these things are erased with just the introduction of other people's experiences. And then it gets demonized. And I think we spoke about this earlier, but the idea of like the first thing you do is have to demonize the people to then legitimate attacking them,
mhm,
right? It's they're the racist. The people talking about the racism are the racist. So if you get rid of those people, then we can go back. Which again, the best day for us is always tomorrow as Black folks. Then we can go back to a time where there was meritocracy, and in this country, the only DEI that's ever existed is white. Because if I can, hire my son, who's a white man who I want him to be in that job, or my friend's son, that's an affirmative action. I'm taking
Mm,
an affirmative action hire to hire somebody who fits our company culture. And like, what is the culture, right? The culture is that sexism. The culture is the homophobia. The culture is the racism. The culture is the classism, right? And if you don't have those connective tissues, then that's going to rub against their own subconscious. And then that
mm,
gets burdened onto people like us when we go into those spaces that we have to then metabolize that and then
mm,
deal with that. And then if we don't deal with that, then we're the problem. Then we're too pushy. Then we're too aggressive. Then we didn't work well. Then you're getting doxed or nixed on your little performance review. So how do we help people through this, right? Because there is a historical. So Rom's the IT guy. He brings a lot of cybersecurity stuff to this podcast. I'm the historian. I'm always looking
yeah,
at things through a historical lens because ain't nothing new under the sun. And brother, I'm sure you know that as well.
yeah.
Um, how do we help people through this stuff, right? Because it happens to us every day. And in fact, we are the experts, even though we may not all have your fantastic degrees, but just existing through this country, even if you have the most rudimentary understanding, you could pick up in a millisecond based on a squint of an eye or a deep sigh or an eye roll. You can pick up on how to survive that. So how do we help people through this structurally, both who are the oppressed and folks who are the more privileged?
Ooh, that is what I would say is, right, I think number one, knowledge and education are always the great equalizer, right? And so I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. If we start taking away people's ability to have knowledge and to think critically, right, and then to be able to challenge, ask questions, challenge systems to dismantle them, then we get to keep them in place. I think the first thing that we have to do is not allow ourselves to be gaslit.
Mm,
When our gut speaks to us and we know what's happening in a space, right? Like you said, that wink of an eye, the head nod, whatever, right? We can't allow ourselves to be gaslit and think that we are the ones who have the issue in that, first and foremost. I think the other part about that is find community. Community is powerful. We are communal people.
that's right.
And know that you are not alone and going through this alone. I think the last thing I continuously tell people, especially right now in this day and age, is joy is an act of resistance,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Joy is an act of, and know what is your source versus what is your resource, right? And there was a woman that I used to work with who used to say that all the time, right? She's like, this is my source, right? My work is my resource, but her source, right, was in her spirituality. When I hear that, for me though, my source is like my family. And
Hmm.
so work is my resource. It is not all of who I am. I don't define myself through that. I define myself in how I show up for the people in my life, right?
Right.
And so I think when we find aspects of community and then we find joy as an act of resistance. For instance, when I'm November 7th, when they were doing the voting, I did an early vote. I was on a boat with a dear friend of mine and her family, and we was in the Bahamas because I said,
Mm.
you know what? I need joy at this moment in time.
That's
I'm not
right.
gonna
That's right.
get in front of the polls and the TV trying to see what's coming through. I ain't gonna do that because I know it's gonna be needed of me when I get back and how to care for community and how I have to show up to fight, right? And
Hmm.
so I think it is giving ourselves joy, giving ourselves community, not allowing ourselves to be gaslit in these situations. I think those are ways in which we handle it. I think it is arm ourselves with knowledge. When you go into a space, know the policies, practices, and procedures, both spoken and unspoken,
Mm.
right? And then make them navigate to the same.
Mm. So just the knowledge of the space that they're in. But I think at the same time, I mean, a lot of the stuff is unspoken, right? You know, a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff that we're dealing with is stuff that is, you know, 'cause we've seen companies that have the best mission statement, right? That have the best, you know, they did the black square on June 20th in 2020. You know, they did that. They got the in this place we have, you know, we believe in this, that, and the third. But yet they'll still be on the news. There'll still be, you know, articles that come out about them or Glassdoor reviews. Um, so I guess, you know, my next question is, how can we validate the authenticity of organizations and their steadfastness as it relates to um, their investment into diversity,
Mhm. I
Especially
think we just saw.
today, you know, the new,
especially, yeah.
because when they can't just put it on a website and just say DEI and then
We like the
they're done
blacks.
and then they're done.
Look, there's a black guy here. I think he's the janitor, but he's here too. Carl, come here, Carl.
I think we just saw that though. Right? We saw these companies who were real quick to roll out, real
Hmm.
quick to dip out. Again, inclusion theater. You did it
Mm,
because you felt like you had to, right? You needed to look good,
mm,
but you weren't really practicing it. And I think we pay attention to those companies. I think we know that in a capitalistic society, money really speaks and talks, right? Montgomery boycott, bus boycott worked for a reason, right? And so it is we validate it by we look at these companies that have still said DEI is of importance. We can look and see what did they change on their websites. And what I mean by that is maybe some are being a little bit more savvy and saying, you know, we might not say diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we can use language that signals that we are still doing the good work so people understand that, right?
mm,
I think we have to look for those things, and then we have to shift and give our attention, our money, our whatever in uplifting those spaces while we're taking away from the other ones, right? And calling them out for that, right? Like, and then when this rolls back, because hopefully, right, the pendulum will swing and shift back the other way. When it shifts,
Mm.
we don't shift with it, right?
Yeah.
Walmart feels that way, then Walmart can continue to feel that way, and I don't have to give my money to it.
That's
Right.
right. That's right. It's funny that like when all these things changed, I'm like, to your point, there was no enforcement mechanism. It wasn't self-executing. And folks were like, we just got to be on the right side. But I'm like, but to whose benefit, right? Like, who is sitting here like, you guys need to do this internally? There's some higher up that has plenty of pictures on his mahogany desk with a bunch of, like, with Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, and these people like, I know some black folks, but I think this has gone too far. And it's just like, can you help explain to people? I'm going to just now transition to my next question. Explain the importance of culture. Can you explain the importance of culture, um, in a framework like a corporation or an academia? Because I think sometimes, folks believe that their culture, their corporate culture, or their academic culture will supersede cultural differences that make up the folks that attend or work at those places. So, what is the importance of culture, and whose culture is more important?
Mm-hmm. Culture is simply the way of people, right?
Mm.
And we all navigate the world differently based off of our identities and who we are and our lived experiences. And so I can't say any culture is better than another culture. What I will say is, in any sort of environment, what we should do or what we can do, because I don't like to speak in shoulds, is how do we leverage the difference that culture brings in that space, right? And by leveraging that, not managing it, right? There's a whole thing around how to shift from managing diversity to leveraging difference. What that is when we are able to bring in different cultures, we are bringing in different ways, perspectives of viewing things, of solving problems, of knowledge,
Mhm.
experience, and really that is where our strength and our greatness is in. And so it's not about whose is better. It's about how are we leveraging, how are we listening, how are we all benefiting from having these various cultures in a space? Because I believe all cultures can live together really
And
respectfully.
let me clarify. I don't mean like individual, like a black culture or an Asian. I mean, like, our corporate culture is this, and it's like, but would that may be oppressive to me, as if you're saying that we all go get drinks at a Friday and we slap butts of women. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I mean. Like, the corporate
Understood.
culture, not like individuals. So I'm not saying that. I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, yeah, you get good. Understood. Thank you for the clarification. Leadership makes the culture, right?
Mhm.
And when you have poor leadership, you have poor culture.
Mm.
And I think some of that is we just have to allow people, if I don't want to go out and drink because I don't drink, respect that, right? The culture can shift easily. When what I've noticed in the years that I have worked at a lot of different institutions, right? Whether you fit the culture or not, if people really like you, if they want you, if your talents and skills, they will allow you to be on the peripheral of what that culture is. I
Mm.
think that cultures can shift. I think when they are harming people, we need to pay attention to when we see these mass exodus of people of color or people of difference, right? Leaving spaces. I think it's time for leadership to question that. But the issue is leadership is never uncomfortable because they're the one who gets to set what the culture is, right?
Mm.
Um, so in that, I think it is about, and I will say that when you think of leadership, right, you think about setting office culture, people are never really taught to be leaders. We just kind of become leaders because you do your job and you do it well. And so people just say,
Mm.
oh, I'm going to put you in space and leadership, right? And then that's power, and people, tend to abuse that. So I think it's, if you have really great leadership, they are aware of the culture that they are creating. And if that is an inclusive culture, what it states is, right, our culture is flexible and people are allowed to jump in and move it and navigate it in the ways in which they need to be comfortable.
Mm. Yeah. I'll give my perspective from a mid-sized business, not quite the enterprise, large corporate world, but when I started my company a little 6 years ago, they started recruiting me, and I looked at their website and I was like, that's a lot of white folks. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated and like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Anyways, I did end up joining, and even as a managerial position, and currently sit on the leadership team and of a very diverse leadership team today. And it's a woman-owned business. It's in cybersecurity. So back then, like women in IT was non-existent. There was, well, not non-existent, but like relatively, it was like 25% to like 75. And then, even racially, the same thing, right? But the company over the past 6 years, even not even necessarily intentionally, yes, we created a DEI charter and things like that. And, but over time, has become very diverse in terms of women in cybersecurity. But also like me coming in and the people in my circle from different cultural backgrounds, the company has in itself become more diverse, multicultural, and those people also know other people. So like when you expand those circles, and one of the things we did was look for talent in places outside the norm, right? So we did attract more women, but we weren't attracted. We weren't just like trying to get a quota. It was let's find the best and let's recruit them to what we believe is the best company, right? And so those things just happen organically. Like if the term DI went away in our company, like it wouldn't. I don't think it would matter in this more because we've gotten to that point of like we've created this, we've created a good cultural, good leadership, and it just happens. But I don't think that's the case in a lot of especially the corporate spaces, and a lot of businesses just don't have that type of leadership and diversity. But I say I look at myself as the prize. I would never go to a company that's not diverse. Like if you're not, it has no diversity, you have no commitment to like some culture, whatever diversity, equity, inclusion looks like to your business, I just would have no interest. And that's kind of why I'm like, okay, like, is DEI fighting for DEI worth the battle, or is it something that we just continue to take up space and do what we think is right, and just it's gonna just keep happening, and we'll put people end up in the right places.
Mm.
But
It sounds like you work for one of those woke corporation.
You're right.
I mean,
one of those mother wokers.
yeah, I don't know if the owner would describe it that way, but it is but it's natural, right? It's not something that people go out their way to, and then that feels good, like right where you don't have to, you know, I guess to say like force it down people's throats. And let me ask this question actually: do you think some businesses did do DEI wrong?
Mm.
And when I say wrong, I
think-
mean like
Straight
illegally, almost
performative.
like illegally, yeah, not just performative, but like I know a lot of them did it performative, and they just didn't. But I'm talking about like they did work, they did do make quotas and things that were bordering like illegal. Like, do you think that existed?
Like discriminatory practices.
Yeah, almost because they didn't know what they were doing.
Right. We need 3 Latinos. I need black.
Because I think that might be the case, but like I don't know.
I will say this, I have been in rooms where that has happened, right? Where they're like, oh, we need to hire this type of person specifically for it, right? So I will say, yes, I think there are some places that have done that, right? And thinking that they were helping, it's that well-intentioned, right? I think I'm really doing something that's gonna support people and help people, and not realizing the harm and the hindrance that that's really doing, especially if you're bringing someone in who can't really do the job. And then you're mad because you chose to bring somebody in that can't do the job. And then it's like all people who look like that can't do it.
See, like we shouldn't have hired that. We should not. Oh, yeah.
Right? Told you so.
Oh,
You let
see?
him in the door.
So, but that,
So,
but
yeah,
that speaks to your role, Payron, your wife's role, like in the whole grand scheme of things, of like why you actually need to probably consult or have an expert if you have no idea what you're doing, right?
I think a good example of that is like, do you guys remember a few years ago there was the what was it, Carter's? The Carter's brand, and the little boy had the shirt on that said like "play like a monkey" or something like that. It was a little black.
Like old
And it's like
yeah, Carter's. Yeah.
I can
H&M, yeah.
I can
H&M.
guarantee you there was some performative DEI stuff or
Mm.
performative cultural competency, or there was none that existed. And it's like, or you'll see something like in NASCAR where what was that one racer that he was like the light skinned black guy, and like they found a noose in the garage. Like these are places that they don't have DEI because DEI was meant to replace the GOB, which is the good old boy system. And the good old boy system says it's okay to have a noose in there. It's okay to have the Confederate flag. It's okay to, put that monkey out. I think it's funny and put on a black model.
Ugh.
It's like there's always something that will happen. And then they'll be like, oh, we need to, reflect on our ways. But I'm sure there is a cascading amount of information to prove this has been a long-standing problem. And I'm sure if you talk to the black people that work there, or however the handful amount of folks that work there, you could have found that this would
Mhm.
have been eventually became a problem. And it's kind of like, and it's something you said earlier, Franklin, that I love. It's the idea of like, and Rom also said this as well, and I'm the third one who did not say it, but that like you guys are the prize, like I'm the prize, right? And and I've always felt like as it relates to my education and my ability to teach people about the history of America, it's that like they're better off for knowing me now, right? Like the fact that they came in contact with me as a black man who is unencumbered by fear to be able to tell them the truth about the history of this country, you are now better off in society because you've met me,
Mm.
right? And this idea of if that challenges some people who've always had the privilege to feel like I was always correct, I was always right because my daddy was right and my granddaddy was right, and my great grand, and it's like, well, no, like you may have been taught a wrong way, and you might have got your position because guess what? You're the DEI in your own perspective, which is didn't earn it, right? That's how they like to use it, didn't earn it,
Mhm.
But in reality, it's this pejorative now, right? So I do want to touch on one more thing. I just, 'cause it just popped in my head. We were talking about it earlier. It's like, oh, culture. I knew I heard something about it earlier, but Lonnie Bunch, Dr. Lonnie Bunch. Do you guys know who that is? He is the spearhead for the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We're actually going to go up there in a couple weeks as a family. But he was speaking at Howard
Mm.
Law on Wednesday, and I jotted down some notes here. And it just because it was just interesting to me. I found him as y'all were talking on my iPad. But he says that uh, culture is the glue.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm.
Culture is the glue, and it is of our expressions of our humanity. And you can't erase that. You can't destroy that, right? You can't
Mm.
destroy the living tradition. You can't destroy from mouth to ear, from life to life. And that's how we've always, survived as black people in this country. Like, right before we were able to read and write, our colonizers' language, we were absolutely communicating through song and through dance and through claps and through sounds and through whistles and through different things, and that's something you cannot destroy. That's also scary, and about the idea of controlling the narrative, because another thing he said was that it's about the movement of memory, movement and memory, excuse me, which asks the question: how do you pass on information from generation to generation to generation to generation, right? Building momentum to problem solve in their time, in their space, right, with the memory of what happened before, to feed a vision of what's to come, right?
Mhm.
And it's like that's the importance of like I think how DEI and how we come in with our different experiences to these spaces. Like we probably could help you understand how to solve this problem
Mhm.
because we were able to do that through history, through our time. And I think that's scary to people when it's like, I need to have this pedagogical, an academic, stamp that like, well, do you have this certification? Do you have this
Yeah.
degree? And it's like, listen, I can help you solve this problem because me and my cousin, figured out this problem, when he was 9 years old, right? And that's a fear, right? And it's like, and it was just a really good conversation because you're speaking to Harvard Law and you're just saying like, there is no one single story.
Yeah.
And I think this attack on DEI is to have one single story. And Lonnie Bunch, he's had a storied career before he spearheaded the National Museum for African American History and Culture. It's a long name. But he said that when he started his career at the National Museum of American History, there was only one narrative that bound this country together. And then 4 words after that really stuck out to me. He said, "But now there's not."
Mm. Yeah.
And it's like that means that everybody gets a story. You get a story. Rom gets a story. Like we're cisgender men, and and we would be considered, straight by the LGBTQ that perspective. But your story is different from our story, and your story matters just as much as our story. And we need to hear your
Mhm.
story so we can have a better collective in this fabric of humanity. And the fear of that, because you want to have one story, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's like that we are African citizens of this world, right?
Mhm.
Like we are under the boot of white supremacy, and we know how to survive that because we know that we are citizens of the world, not just this settler colonial project known as America. And that scares them because their history starts when they came to these shores. Because before that, there was no white people. It was you were British, you were German, you were Italian, you were French, you were whatever the case in Europe. And now this flattening and this, and like I said earlier, this negation of your backstory becomes who you are. And I think DEI is very similar to what Lonnie Bunch was talking about. Is like now there's more than one story. And working here is not, or going to school here is more than just the black experience. It's like, no, I'm Senegalese, I'm from Jamaica, I'm from, the South, I'm from the North, my grandma's from Alabama, the Great Migration. It becomes a larger story that is richer. And sometimes they can't get down with that because they may see themselves with Robert E. Lee, maybe, instead of um, um, John Brown. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So that too becomes a problem, right? Having one single narrative. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, when we think about narrative, right, we have to think about the power that is in narrative and in story. We have to think about that it gives representation, right? It gives visibility. It creates empathy. When I can hear your story, I understand it. It
Mm,
creates connection. It creates compassion, right? So now that we have 9 stories versus just one, you have to
mm,
see me. You can't dehumanize me, right? And
mm,
how do we do atrocious things to people, to humans? We take away humanity,
mm,
right? Enslaved people were not people. We were what? Property. So therefore, you can enslave us, right? So if we look at all the horrible things that have happened throughout history to other people, it's because we were able to dehumanize them, right? And so what those different stories do is they make us human. And
mm.
then when we are human, you are unable to have this disassociation from the acts that you were doing to other humans. So yeah, I hear that. Having those stories is powerful.
But
Yeah.
there's kind of a
I
will
think
to like not want to do that, right? I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
no, I was just saying I kind of also comment like think of that as what's commonly called like diversity of thought, right? Well, it ends up and
Mhm.
turns
Hmm.
into diversity of thought, which has value, a lot of value. Just like for you were saying, like the marketing failures, right? Like those things wouldn't happen if you didn't have other perspectives. And I find it so weird. I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me, but in a world with all of these cultures, right, and people love to travel and experience other cultures, and then and even within your own city, right, and diverse cities, and people just want to be so myopic and have their way and not really experience other cultures, experience other foods, other languages, other music, other anything. It's just an odd way to live in an interconnected world in 2025, right? So I'm
Let me ask you this, Franklin. This is a little bit off the DEI path, but I think it's important for us to talk about it as three black men. Um, we know in black male culture there is this. I think a lot of times Frantz Fanon said, the goal of the colonized black man is to be the white man. With that, some of the things that the white man does, some of his hatreds that we imbibe in the black community is black man,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
some of your intersectionality as a in the LGBTQI plus community. Um, the I'm fighting that within my frat group, within my friend groups, right? I went to spend time with my frat brothers. I've spent time with them in a long time. A couple weeks ago in Greensboro, and somebody said, a very homophobic joke, and I jumped in.
Mhm.
And they haven't seen me in years, right? They're used to the old Payron before I had hair, back in college, and they're like, "Wait, what you checking me on that for, bro? Like, what you mean? I mean, oh, you like that now?" It's like, yeah, man, because what you're upholding is the same hateful system that actually
Mhm.
impacts us too, right? Like patriarchy hurts men too. Homophobia hurts straight people too, right? Like these things are not just, oh, I'm going to say this and it's tongue in cheek because these things end up harming people, like
Yeah.
physically harming people, right? So within the black community, the I mean, I feel like, I'm not saying I'm like, I'm fighting for you, man. I'm out there doing the hard work. I'm not saying that. I hate that when people say to me like I would have voted for Obama for a third term. Like I hate that when people who are of the more privileged class tell us I hate that. But what I'm saying though is this problem is so pervasive of homophobia within, black male, the barbershop conversations and all this stuff. And then it leads into they make poor decisions, right? Like for example, during the election, I heard a lot, they would say the gay community, they get more than I get. And I'm like, that's a false premise because one, anything is a black experience, right? Because if a
Yeah.
black person can be it, it's a black experience, right? A black person can be gay, a black person can be a mailman, a black person can be a lawyer, a black person can be a doctor. So whatever it is, a black person can do it is a black experience. I, I mean, I don't want to ask you for your whole life story, how you've combated this, but what is the next step do you think we need to take as black men to dismantle this? Because
Mm.
I'm trying to do every single day, but what do you think?
Woo. Again, I think it's about seeing people's humanity,
That's
right? And
right.
how do
That's
I
right.
allow myself space to be in time to be in space with someone, right? Beloved community, if it is something that I am that offended by or afraid of, right? Or have hatred towards, lean in. How do I lean in closer to it to gain a better understanding,
Mm.
right? It's not about acceptance. I'm not asking you for approval of who I am. It's not about tolerance, right? Tolerance is literally what? To put up with.
Right.
One, right? I'm not
I,
asking for
to-
that
I
either,
tolerate mosquitoes at a barbecue. I tolerate that. I don't
right?
like it, but I tolerate it. Yeah.
Right? And so it's not about that. It's not
Mm.
about acceptance because I'm not asking you, I'm gonna be who I am all day long. I'm gonna be a pride parade walking down the street on my
That's
by
right.
myself. Let's be clear. Right? But what I can't ask for is understanding.
Mm.
Disagreement isn't disapproval, right? And if you don't like what I'm doing, you ain't got to do it, but you can still
Right.
see my humanity. Because the one thing that I think is connecting all of us is our blackness,
Come
right?
on. Come
And
on.
let's be clear, if you really want to, if you really get deep,
Mm.
who was the person behind MLK?
Bayard Rustin. Come on
And
now.
who was he? What was he? A black gay man,
That's right.
right?
That's
So
right.
at the end of the day,
Mm.
right, we have always been there.
That's
And I
right.
think it is, we have to get out of those things. What is really joining us? It is our blackness, right? The one thing I had to do some searching about, am I gay? Am I not? What is this? The one thing I have always known about myself and the people who look like me,
Mm.
we are black.
No
I've
question.
never questioned it.
That's right.
I cannot question it.
Hmm.
It is the most salient of my identities, right?
Mm.
And so in those spaces, for me, and I can't speak for others, give grace to people who aren't there yet. Because when you really go back as well, think about the things and how certain acts of homosexuality were used as humiliation rituals for men specifically, right? Breaking the buck, things of that
Yeah.
nature. So
Mhm.
all of that carries in the psyche, right? How do we carry trauma? We pass trauma in two different ways. We pass it down by word of mouth, and we pass it down in the womb, right?
Mm.
And so it
Mm.
has been,
Mm.
all of that has carried, it's in the psyche of us. So it's having that understanding and having that grace. Now, let's be very clear, right? I lay hands and not in the name of Jesus sometimes, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Right? Right? I ain't gonna let you disrespect
Try
me.
Jesus, don't try me. Right. Right. Right.
That part, he's still working on me. I ain't done yet.
Right. We're,
Okay?
we're,
Still.
we're, we're, we're all projects here.
Right? But I say that to say we can give grace to each other and give understanding. And I understand what your lived experiences are and why you may have, certain views, but I can still see your humanity. I still see your blackness. And for me, that is of importance. And then how do I help you see my blackness? That as we are both black men, both caring for community, right? And if we are caring for community, I can't hurt who looks like me. I
Right.
can't hurt my
Right.
brother.
I'm right there with you, man. And I think, because I think sometimes it gets pinned as like queerness and is somehow a white man's thing. And it's like, we weren't that back in Africa. It's like, yes, the thing is, it's so in us, in human beings, is
Mhm.
because when I tell a story like in 1493 when the Portuguese went to Congo and they saw different nations in Africa, and there was different types of family, right? There's different types of being, as you said earlier. It went against the Portuguese church and the Pope who gave the doctrine of discovery out in 1493. Did they then criminalize that? And this is where we get terms like uncivilized. This is where we get terms like heathen. This is where we get terms like savage, because it goes against their doctrine. So when people say that's not innocent, yes, it was, right. Some of our oldest luminaries within modern memory, again, as they try to erase our memory, were queer people. And I just it eats me up. But I'm not saying like I was always like this, right? I too was steeped in homophobia, right? I too was steeped in transphobia as a young man, and saying these terrible things because I thought that's the way it was. My grandfather was extremely religious, and he, basically told me that's how you're supposed to talk to people. Now I realize, now that he's passed, and I realize how my family's set up, is that like a lot of us are hurting, and we're trying to place the blame on somebody else. There's a reason
Mhm.
why that boy got beat up. There's a reason why she got raped because she was wearing that. There's a reason why that kid. It's like, no, we have a sick society. We need to fix it instead of just trying to blame someone for just being themselves. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to keep fighting it. And I think I fight it with facts. I fight it with knowledge. I fight it with my compassion. And I think something you said is important, where you're like, I'm going to try to teach you, not me per se or but like the person you're speaking with, to see my blackness, to see my humanity. But some people don't want to see that, man.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
how do we fight that? Because I think that's what's pervasive.
Yeah, well, I think you don't. I think in order for people to change, they have to be ready, willing, and able. What I
Mm,
do is extend, and then I wait for you to be ready, willing, and able, right? Because I
mm,
push you. That's about me making it about myself, not
Hmm.
about your growth and who you are,
Yeah.
right? Like you
mm.
said, you weren't always like this. Probably happened is some life experience,
Yeah,
some knowledge, some education, right? When we know better, we do better.
that's right.
Now, when you get to that point and you're ready, I'm not going to shut you down, right? My
Mm,
heart is for Black people. I will not shut down my people, right?
that's
Because
right.
in order for us to make it, we have to be together.
Yeah.
But when you're ready, I'll be here.
Mm,
I think I understand that when what you're saying. I was at a conference in Vegas a couple of months ago. It was a cybersecurity conference. And
no.
at the end of it, at the end of it, I was talking to the guy who ran it as a white man, good guy, and I told him, I said, well, there was no diversity. There was no women. There was no black people. I mean, there was, but like it wasn't like speaker wise, and the people who were speaking, there was no black folks. There was no brown. There was no women. But I said, yeah, it was a good conference, but like, where's the even though it's a bad word these days, diversity. And he called me up a few days later and he said, hey, want to put you on the advisory board, boom, boom, bang. Like I feel like that those are the type of ways that we can put ourselves in these situations. Like, well, Payron and I know you, Franklin, this is this is what you do. But like, and actually, Payron, I know you've been putting in the work here in Union County, but like, just like ways to give an opportunity for people to realize, like, oh, okay, like, hey, I don't know if he didn't think about it, but as opposed to somebody who's like, what are you
Mm,
talking about? Having a negative reaction. And I'm not gonna sit there and fight that. Like, if you don't want me there, then peace out. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not coming back to your conference. Like, I don't want to speak at your thing. I don't want to give you any kind of advisory or anything, right? So that's kind of how I perceive what you said, and that kind of rings true. But
Because how much time is enough time? I think James Baldwin said, it took my father's time, it took my grandfather's time, it took my uncle's time, it
yeah.
took my cousin's time. I mean, it took my lifetime. So, I mean, as we're talking about homophobia, we're talking about racism, we're talking about sexism. I mean, I know we want to meet them in the middle, and this can be kind of our final question here. As we're trying to meet people in the middle and trying to build these bridges, like how much grace, right? Because right now I'm seeing, I
right,
mean, for example, in my wheelhouse, there's a bunch of like liberal white women telling me that like I've done the work, but like you haven't had the hard conversation with, because you sleep next to power, right?
Mm,
Like you're in neighborhoods next to power, right? And I think about that show House of Cards. There's a line that always stuck out to me. It says, "Those who approximate power think that they wield it."
yes. Mm,
And
mhm.
it's like the idea of like, you got to talk to your Uncle Ron, you got to talk to your Aunt Sal, you got to talk to, that MAGA neighbor of yours, and you chose to not do that, right? We have to have these conversations all the time. Oh, come on, you can't be like that, play. Let me tell you what she's really saying. But they're unwilling to do that. So how much grace? As James Baldwin said, how much time does it take for your progress?
mm.
Mm, mm, mm.
Especially when we come across these adults still with bigoted views and just saying like the things you were saying, like from like high school, middle, like the things you say, like bigotry was what it was. And then you grow up and realize, like, damn, you didn't have these other perspectives, and you were just an ignorant youngin. But like, what's the excuse for like a 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old, like,
And I think this is where I am too Pollyanna, right? But I think for me it
Not
is
for me, man.
they have lived a certain life experience that gives them those beliefs and whatever, right? And here's the thing. I can love your humanity and not like who you are and what you do, right? I
Correct.
can and that gives me agency on how I navigate you, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And what I say is grace is a wonderful thing, but it does have a limit. And again, and nor do I allow you to disrespect me either, right?
Mm.
And so I will continue to give it until you disrespect me, and then we have a problem, right? I'll correct you once or twice, and then after that, then I just navigate because that's about you. And I'm allow you to sit in where you are and who you are, because your life is going to be miserable while I am still choosing joy. Because let me tell two things: so nobody block my blessing nor steal my joy, and I will give
Mm.
it to no one, right? And for me, I think that is a great way of just fighting back. Is I won't give you my joy. So
Mm.
I'll give you time to change. And again, I'm willing to help when you are. But if you happy, you like it, I love it. If that's who you are and where you're at.
That's one of those black phrases right there. You like it, I love it.
Exactly. We good. We good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Franklin, we got to have you back on. I mean, we could have this conversation all day, brother. It's my first time talking to you, and again, and I want to keep this conversation going. And we're just getting this thing started. We've had a bunch of folks on, and we've had a lot of good experiences, and we're trying to build something, right? Where you don't have to go to. These are conversations you're not going to hear in mainstream media. These are conversations you're not going to hear on the usual radio or podcast, even black podcast. Dare I say sometimes. So we want to make this a different experience for people where one, yes, we're going to have a political lens about things that are going on, but also culturally why they're going on, right? Not just bullet points on a PowerPoint, but like what's the history behind this? What's the human impact? Not just the intent as we were talking earlier, but what's the impact
Mhm.
materially to people that know this stuff like yourself and folks that are trying to synthesize it for as many people as possible because we know a lot of folks in our community they don't have the time, right? And that's by design, right? To be so busy that you don't have time to read a book, to be so busy that you can't follow the news, to be so busy that you can't educate yourself on a policy at work, right? These are by design. So hopefully our show is bridging that gap, and we thank you for coming on because you're helping us so much to do that. And thank you so much for coming on tonight, Franklin. Where can folks find you? Where can they sign up for? Let me get it right here. Frank Interactions, is it S or just N? Is it Interactions?
Frank Interactions.
Silenced or silenced? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm getting
Uh,
I just want to
well,
make sure I'm getting it right. Okay, so how can folks find you and use your services?
hey, first, I appreciate you for having me on. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for the community. I need it, right? This is
That's
joy as
right.
resistance.
That's right.
So you can hit me on my website, www.frankinteractions.com. Life's all about being frank. And so am I. You said I do that? You're
I
welcome,
did. I
right?
like that. You're right, right.
So hit me up. I'm happy to continue conversations, right? Do a lot of work around just inclusion work, group dynamics, right? Leadership, things of that nature.
Awesome, awesome. And what's next for you? What do you have? What's something that folks can look out for? What you got coming up next? Any speaking engagements?
Uh, I have a speaking engagement at a university happening in, well, really more of a training that's happening in July, but a lot of that is on hold as I am taking some students to South Africa for a trip where we are
Oh,
going to be comparing the anti-apartheid movement to civil rights movement, right? So we're
Oh,
oh,
looking at the
come
grassroots
on,
of it.
come
uh,
on.
love to hear
Yeah,
the after that trip.
Got to have you back on after
Yeah.
that. Got
let me
to,
know.
All right.
got to. Now, I think it's now the last question. Have you been to Africa before?
I have not. It's my first time.
Now, Ron, you've been right.
I've been to DRC and I've been to Ghana and Morocco.
I gotta
Oh,
get.
Have you
I
been?
got. I got. No, I gotta touch.
Oh,
I gotta
okay.
touch I gotta touch the earth of the motherland. I got to at some point before I expire on this planet. But Franklin, thank you again, my friend, and we will have you back on. We wish you nothing but the best, brother, and thank you for all your insight and wisdom, and thank you for joining us on the Radical Roots.
appreciate you. Thanks for having me. Have a good night, y'all.
Thanks. You
Take it
too.
easy, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks, that was Doctor. I'm gonna give him his moniker,
Yes.
Doctor Franklin Ellis, and breaking down about DEI and countless other things that kind of are the foundation of DEI, right? Or culturally of why DEI is important and what it means to us two DEIs on this call. But what do you think about Dr. Ellis?
Yeah, I thought definitely great hearing his perspective, especially like somebody who's a practitioner in the space, that's wildly um, being attacked and just different. But he didn't seem to have any worries. You know what I mean? And like these things existed before, where there was multiculturalism, belonging, before it had the
Hmm.
DEI, and these things will continue. I do believe that. So it was really nice to hear his perspective.
I think the good thing too, like of all this like attack on DEI is like once you erase all the DEI, you see the incompetence. Like and we talk about signal gate a lot, but like yeah, you see what happens when you remove all the DEI, you get a bunch of alpha bros in there, like fist pumping and emoji, circle jerking to like, oh, the attack plans are at 9:03. Like that's what you get. That's what you get.
Yeah, that's the nepotism, the
Right.
your friends, your uh these people went to Ivy League schools through legacy admissions,
Right. Right.
and
And through
they've
racism. Let's be honest.
highlighted
Like
it. I,
these schools that even don't hire legacy people or don't admit legacy people, they have racist hiring practices. You
Mhm,
can't tell me Harvard that has their law school admissions was like 2% black people this year. You can't
mhm.
tell me all the folks that took the LSAT and busted their ass is political science majors or English majors or whatever. Only 2% were good enough to get in the Harvard. It's just outright rate. We have, to his point earlier, we have to stop gaslighting ourselves. Like, well, the only best was 2% in Harvard. But you got, Jared Kushner going to Harvard because his dad bought a wing. Like, come on, man. Come on.
Right. There's a whole remember there was a whole scandal with celebrities and buying their kids. That was just one that got caught. Like
On our old
that was
podcast, that
normal.
was our first episode. On our old podcast, that was our very first episode. Was that? We
Mm.
called it Varsity Blues. Yep.
What was her name again? It was the
Laughlin, not Laughlin, Lori,
it was
yeah,
a
from
couple
Full
of them.
House, the Full
Yeah.
House lady.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but that's where we are now, man. And but I think to his point, anytime that we were demanding, not we're not demanding that we want to be with white people. That's not what we've ever demanded. We were demanding we have the skill set, we have the know-how, we have the smarts, and you are being unfair by not giving us an opportunity to even apply.
Yeah, it's
And like
merit.
that's the whole problem.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
Right.
merit. It's never no one said that you got to lower the bar to make these things
No.
happen, and it's not, and it's not just racial. Like even at I was at another cybersecurity conference, but here in Charlotte,
Oh my gosh, you go
two
to one
weeks
every
ago,
day.
but one of the presentations,
Yeah.
neurodiversity in
Hmm.
cybersecurity, and they were talking about autism, ADHD, and potentially like those roles or roles within cybersecurity being attractive
Right.
to those people that have
Absolutely.
and that love to do investigations and find the needle in the haystack and things like that. And this the attack that this administration has is so blanket that like the word diversity is like the worst thing ever, and it's akin to terrorism or something, right? And they would just
Right.
this doge and everything, they would just wipe that away, right? And so but what this tells me, especially like at these conferences, is like in the real world people aren't really just like buckling and running away from actual diversity and equity inclusion. They still embrace it. They're talking about it. Here's a presentation of neurodiversity, right? Like and it's just like one piece of it, but I don't think it's like everyone's scrambling to scrub and, oh, I don't want to talk to I can't have you speak at my thing because you're black, you're brown, like you can't, we're not gonna have women. It's not that. It's so I don't know what the battle is in the like at a Meta or at a Tesla, like they are known to have racist practices within their business, but
No.
But like
Not Tesla.
Amazon and the Fortune 500, and like, well, what is it? What is it really like? On the ground there, and I think these things will still persevere.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to be that DEI title,
Well,
but this
well,
administration
the
is
thing.
attacking anything they can in any way they can.
Well, as I always say, again, this is white supremacy's last gasp, and they will. It is a suicide pill. White supremacy is a suicidal ideology. So that doesn't mean that this country will make it out. And I think it's time for us to start imagining more, imagining bigger, and because it, this is the reality. Poor black and brown people are the labor of this country, both intellectually and physically, right? Like if you can't pick an apple, if you can't code an app, because poor black and brown people do the intellectual labor of this country, right? They do the coding, right? From these H-1B folks that they're hiring from Southern Asia and from African countries. They hire them, and then they dangle over them deportation and immigration policies to put fear in them. But they do the cheap labor, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, physical labor, right? We know folks who are Latino, who are immigrants who come to this country who may be undocumented, do the physical work. So again, as I said earlier, if you can't pick an apple or code an app, you screwed. And they know that's the future of this country. As I said earlier, the majority of people who are below the age of 18 are brown.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's what's killing them. So we hear Elon Musk say the birth rates of this country are going low. There are more people today in this country than there were yesterday. So the birth rate isn't getting lower, it's getting higher. It's just for white people, it is not due to deaths of despair, due to, a bunch of not alpha bros, incels who women do not want to be with. And women are choosing to, get their own degrees and get smarter and not be chained to a stove to work for to be for one of these men. That is why, right? The inequality, mass inequality, the inability to buy a home, the inability to access healthcare are all countless reasons. And I think someone needs to study one day the most recent season. I don't know if you watched. This is a guilty pleasure of ours at our household of Love Is Blind. Love Is Blind. It was in, I want to say, Minnesota. I think it was in Minnesota, and it was a very boring season. The entire season, it was like, oh, blah, Minnesota.
I've never.
But what, you never watched Love Is Blind?
No.
Oh, it's a treat. It's a treat. But the thing is, and the feedback is very consistent. In fact, we felt it while we were watching this. It was a very bland season. But near the end, when the people started getting close to, are they going to get married or not? I know I sound like I'm like one of these gossip girls, but I'm just saying but when they got there, all the dudes were like super conservative, but they weren't like saying like I like Trump and I like conservatism. But the women who were more, in touch with their emotions and kind of intellectually, they would ask them like, so what do you think about politics? What do you think about, a woman's right to choose? What do you think about LGBTQ rights? And these guys would be like, I mean, my church says this, and then the women would be like, mm. And then at the end, they all did not get married.
I you
And
know I yeah.
no, go
I
ahead.
saw the clip. I mean, I know you're like, I actually just
Yes, it was big. Yeah, it became a part of the zeitgeist. People were talking about this, right? Yeah, and like because this is what they're afraid of. This is why they're afraid of DEI because the one girl who I think that's her, she was ripping his ass up in the motherfucking limo afterwards. She was like, we're in
Mhm.
Minnesota. How can him right there? She's like, how can he not care about Black Lives Matter? And it happened here in this state, George Floyd getting killed. I mean, I was like, damn, girl, that's right. And he was sitting there like, I mean, I think the lives of blacks are okay. I mean, it was like, dude. So that's why they got to get rid of it. But the thing is, it's not going to change nothing because what did I say earlier? It's the momentum of memory,
Mm,
right? From mouth to ear, from life to life. You can't stop this. The archives don't mean nothing without us putting our lifeblood into it.
mm,
Y'all ain't got no sauce.
mm.
You can't do this. Go to hell, JD Vance. Go to hell, Donald Trump. You can't mess with us. We
Right,
are the culture.
right. But she was a good example of what to do. I thought,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
She didn't give in. She's like, look, no, I'm not. I'm like, I
And she
have
pressed him
principle. I
multiple
have
times.
principles. You don't meet that. And I don't think he wasn't even necessarily like, like an overt MAGA
No, not at
bigot,
all.
but
That right, right.
the principles of like, well, we don't align. I'm not going to lower my standards, my principles, myself to be with you, even though I love you. That was kind of what she said, and I think
Yep.
that that's commendable,
Yep.
right?
And
She's a
but
white
that's why they
woman,
don't want. And
you know.
exactly, she's the prize, right? A blonde white woman. That's the like the top prize in white supremacy, right? Is to have a blonde, standardly attractive white woman to be on your arm. But what she was saying was that, like, again, to your point, like, if you don't care about LGBTQ rights, if you don't care about, the rights of black people, if you don't care about the rights of the disabled and the poor, like, I'm not just going to be with you. But this is why the right doesn't want women to vote, and they're pushing the Save Act. This is why the right doesn't want women to have, the ability to choose, because they want them to be chained to them by a baby in this capitalistic system where you must work to be able to provide for yourself. And
Mm,
again, this mythology where there's ever a time where the majority of men were the single provider for the home never existed. Even in the 50s, that was in the 36% of men were single providers for a household. So even this halcyon days of the 50s, it never existed. It never existed. And then for black people, it absolutely never fucking existed. Uh, my grandma worked, and guess what? Her mama worked, because guess what? We were servile people to this country.
mm,
And that's why, for his inability to understand that and to just say, well, it's about my church and what I feel, it's like, she's like, what, dude, you're cool and all, but like, you ain't cool and all. And
mm,
that's what they're afraid of. That's why they want to get rid of all this DEI shit. But at the end of the day, they still love our music. They're still putting TikToks. I saw this girl who I used to work with at one of my first jobs out of college. She's big MAGA. Went to the first inauguration and everything.
mm,
Married our manager, actually, ironically. He's MAGA.
mm.
And they were at the inauguration. I just saw a video of her on TikTok yesterday with this like black, they did like the over voice where they're like saying it's this black, voice from some other video, I
Okay,
guess.
yeah.
And so I'm like, but it's like we give y'all everything. Y'all have nothing. No style, no comedy. We invented comedy in its modern form, stand-up comedy. We invented, all the music that you like, country, rap, rock and roll, is all us. Macaroni and cheese is us. You name it, is us. Right? So like, y'all have nothing. And again, you have no labor because your labor is nothing. Our labor is everything. And the idea that they would say, well, I just want to go back to a day where a man was a man working. We come from labor. They used to ask Paul Robeson, why do you care about labor and you're an attorney? And he says, because my people did the labor. My people were born of labor. My ancestors were captives, but they came from people who were not captives.
Mhm.
Again, we are African. We have an African citizenship on this planet. And that scares them because they're trying to start the clock in 1776. This is when humanity starts. Humanity starts for everybody in 1776. No, it ain't. A book I read, I'll leave you with this. A book I read, and my wife read it. It's called, I think it's called A Sky Full of Elephants. And
Mhm.
it's about like if all the white people died. But in the book, he's talking to this guy who he's a very important person in this area. And he talks about this device called Inanagbo. And he says when they did some data research on it, and Inagbo, what it is, it's kind of shaped like a pencil, and basically it you could like do math with it and like measurements and things of that nature. And like when they first did what's it, like data, not data, but like date, like you could tell how old something is. What's the word I'm thinking of? Like date, you know what I'm
Ar-
talking about.
Archaeology. Like,
Well, I mean, that's a profession somebody would use, but like it's like you can like tell how old something was. And
okay,
they first did it, it was like 6,000 years old,
okay.
which predates like Grecian mathematics, right, and
Hmm.
Pythagoras and all this stuff. But then when they scratch it again, it's actually 25,000 years old.
Mm,
So we talk about like, oh, the smartness of Rome and Greece, like the aqueducts, they learned that from Africans.
hmm,
The columns, they learned that from Africans. But if they say your history starts in
mm,
1776 in chains,
mm,
this is why. What did Lonnie Bunch say? When he started, there was one narrative that bound this country together. One narrative. And DEI pokes a hole in all that shit. Or if it's done properly, or us two DEIs, right, in the work that we do, as Mayor Robert Burns would say, we poke a hole in all that, and segue. Has he gotten back to us? Do we know where we at? The clock's ticking. We're on
Nah,
Robert Burns one.
he has not replied.
Where we at? Where we at?
He has not replied. So the
We could do an
invitation's been
emergency
out.
episode, Robert Burns. Emergency episode. Well, folks, this was great. We thank Dr. Franklin Ellis for coming on and having a riveting conversation with us about DEI. Please like, share, and subscribe. Rom has something else to say. I'm sorry,
I
Rom.
was just curious. I know we didn't really at first off with Trump's and China's trade war. I
Oh
can't
God,
I
yeah.
can't even keep up with that shit. So I'm not even going to try to speak on because
His insider trading. Yeah.
yeah, because first it's here's the tariffs, and then there's exceptions for electronics and phones and stuff, and then it's like
He blinked.
he's saying that there's not the cabinet saying it's temporary. Then they're saying semiconductor inspection. Like it is a mess. This is I don't know who runs anything like this.
Wait. The thing is, you could tell. You know, there's a problem because like they're all going 14 different directions on this shit, right? So they can't even get the spin right. That's how you know it's a problem. They can't even get the spin right. You got I forget the guy who was getting grilled by head of the black Horsford, head of the black congressional caucus, and he was like, "So wait, are you going to pause the tariffs?" He was like, "We're not going to pause the tariffs." Then like in the committee, like Trump paused the
Yeah.
tariffs and via tweet, and he's like, "Well, he did it via tweet," and he was like, "I didn't know." He's like, "Well, who's running it?" So like they can't even get their spin right. You got all these right wing influencers saying, you know what? It's good that you lost all that money in your 401k. It gives you character. You got Ben Shapiro being mad. You got Joe Rogan saying what's going on. You got Portnoy crying, but then shaking Trump's hand at the UFC. They don't know what's going on. But this is
It's
what happens when you get rid of DEI. You get WEI, white, entitled, and incompetent.
yeah. So that's happening. Who knows what this week will bring? The markets are still down, and they bounce back a little bit like Thursday or Friday, and everything's very reactive right now to the
Yeah,
news.
right.
We haven't even like the market hasn't even reacted to all of the effects that the actual tariffs will have and how the
Correct.
world is realigning. So
Yes, it is.
it'll be interesting to see.
They're
Um,
saying,
uh,
"Go to hell, Trump, with your damn tariffs." We going. The EU's already they already meeting with China. Luis da Silva down in Brazil, he's meeting with Xi Jinping in May.
mhm.
Now, where do we get our steel from? We get our steel from Brazil. So they're saying, look, America is becoming dumber, is becoming more violent, is becoming more isolated.
Yeah,
And
and
when folks were saying, I'm sorry, last thing I said, but when folks were saying like, I want someone who could run this country like a business. This is what you get.
a lot of businesses don't even run like this poorly,
Right.
and so because this
Right.
is a
I'm just saying,
this
like,
is very
a business
fly
does
by the
not.
seat of your
Right.
pants, like
Right.
act now, fix it later, or
Not fix it later. Just
or
move.
ask for forgiveness later, type of administration.
Oh
So
yeah,
like
yeah.
so like if
Right.
you're gonna like affect farmers or businesses here, you would think that there would be a plan in place, subsidies. There is absolutely nothing.
That one dude went viral. Have you seen that video? That white dude who's like, he's been stitched by a bunch of people.
Because
Where he was
he
like,
was crying, he started crying, and he
oh,
was
I don't know if
pissed. Well, not crying,
he
but
was
like
mad.
he was mad
Oh,
that people were
yeah.
saying you
Yes,
deserve it.
him.
Yeah.
Him. Yeah, he's like, wow, that's fucked up. Did you think my business? It's like, but dude, you didn't give a fuck that he wanted mass deportations now. What about the people who got disappeared from the streets? Are you upset about that too? No, you wanted that. This is all baked in. So yes, we are not gonna be a wilting violet for you. Like, go to hell.
And they're gonna
And like,
hope. They're gonna hope till the end. And like I don't think he's not gonna change. He's gonna hold on to Trump's gonna save me, and I don't think these people are they're not serious.
but what did I say about that? I said these people are not going to turn on the Republican Party.
Mhm.
They're going to, at the very worst, unless Trump slits their mother's throat personally with a knife, they will only say, okay,
It's
that's just Trump. The next guy's gonna be better. It's like, you fucking idiot.
yeah. That's why waiting is not a strategy, because these people are in a cult. So I did want to talk about real quick, Kilmar.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So
Yes.
uh they say he's alive.
Okay.
So on Friday, on I think it was Thursday or Friday, the judge ruled that the Supreme Court ruled that the federal judge was right and that they had to facilitate his return, but they didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
effectuate legal
Effectuate.
effectuate, which means that they would have to like actually physically bring him. So like basically they're saying that they left too much. They left too much. It's too much gray still, right?
Vagueness, yeah.
Clearly,
Right.
because Trump has said today that well, we've updated his legal status, so if he gets to our border, then he can come in. But that's up to El Salvador's president in El Salvador.
But
So they should just ship
it's
this man off. They done paid $5 million to ship off all these people,
right.
and he's
Our
coming.
tax dollars.
He's coming here tomorrow. The president of El Salvador.
I mean,
You
they
mean
can
to tell
plane
me?
pool.
You mean to tell me that there's no pull, no, hey, I'm not gonna pay you. They
Well, the
don't
thing
want to get
is,
him back, and I don't
El
know if he's alive. I'm
Salvador,
not convinced he's alive.
El Salvador is our contractor at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're basically paying to. They're basically outsourcing this. So the idea they're like, we don't know what to do is blah blah blah. You can turn off the spigot. I mean, we've all dealt in corporations when you have a contractor or you've done contract work or whatever. Like you're at the behest of the people who are paying you. So this whole idea where they're like, I don't know. Could you imagine? I don't know have you ever done contract work, but like I've done contract work, but like it being like the main corporation being like we're paying Payron to do this, and then Payron being like, well, yeah, I'm only doing what you told me to do. And then they're like, well, we have no idea what Payron is doing. It's like motherfucker, like
Right.
I've been working for weeks positively to get this money, and you've been cool with that, and you've seen the work that I've been doing. So you want me to do something else? I don't know. I don't know what Payron's doing. And the thing, it works on enough smooth brain people out there who these knuckle draggers that want to believe this shit because again, it's they believe in the man. I was explaining to my wife earlier. There is a religious capacity to this, right? This we've heard all through the church. They're like, God works in mysterious ways, right? God works in, He does what we don't understand God's ways, right? And that's just the way I've always kind of conceptualized within the church, where there's like, hey, I can't explain this to my congregation, but it's politically good for me to say this, right? Or it works for me as for my power dynamics with the congregation. We've heard that, right? Whether it be with homophobia or women's rights or or never challenging the system.
Mm-hmm.
It works the same way with Donald Trump. Kelly McEnany was on, and she was saying like, these what Trump does, and Trump's a businessman, and Trump's the art of the deal, and Trump's the businessman. He's doing the deals like the art of the deal, and the deals like the art, and the art's like the deal. And it's like basically we don't understand his ways. And this is so when you have the imprimatur of he also is blessed by God, like God, and so then therefore you can just trust in whatever like God. When Trump says some shit like, oh, he was an illegal, oh, we'll let him come here, they're just gonna trust whatever the fuck he says. And that's the danger. But that's also the the low expectations that conservatism sells to them is they don't have to think. They don't have to have critical thinking. They don't have to have empathy. Just believe whatever Trump says.
Yeah, and that's again kind of going back to that. Do ask for forgiveness later, right? Like you're not even asking for
Yes.
forgiveness, but just do like
No.
that. That's the whole point. Like they don't give a shit about the laws. They'll break the laws and then say, oh well,
Right.
it
He's a
was it
fucking
was it
felon.
was an administrative error. That means somebody,
Come on.
that's a lie. It was somebody consciously knew read his legal status and still made a
Hmm.
conscious decision to deport him. And whoever that person and persons is, I hope that they see the punishment they deserve for what they've done. Because if this administration ever loses power, this regime ever loses power, these people, first off, Trump will sell them out. He won't even he'll forget to pardon your ass. So if you're an ICE agent, and then there is like states, if a federal agent goes into a state and breaks the law, states need to start considering enforcing laws, kidnapping laws, wrongful imprisonment laws against federal
But
agents.
what if they agree with it? That's the problem.
Well,
Is
that's
the
the problem.
Democratic Party
Mhm.
the Democratic Party has ceded the ground even on the immigration debate for so long that that's what gives rise to this shit. It always happens in history when the more middle of the road party or other side opposition party gives way. Same thing happened in Hungary. It happened with the Whigs versus the Democrats, where they were like they couldn't make a stance against what slavery, and the radical Republicans were born out of that, right? With Abraham Lincoln, they're like, no, we're going to stop this. I mean, of course, they were also white supremacists, but like I mean, that's how it works. So when the Democrats were seizing the ground by calling, doing the fucking Laken Riley Act that allows them to go into sanctuary places like hospitals, churches, schools. It gives way to this shit. It's like, and y'all voted for it,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't have a leg to stand on.
Yeah.
And if we don't say that as folks that are ostensibly voting for the Democratic Party, like where's the conversation being had? Because if it's all about illegals, again, we have to go back. This whole project is illegal.
Right.
So you're telling people, and as you tell them all the time, that like your ancestry is indigenous, like they're calling them illegal.
Right.
That's this project.
One of the things you mentioned, about like Trump, I don't know if you saw Mike Johnson compared himself to Moses. He said he's a prophet today.
That was a while ago, right? Was that
Was
today?
it? Oh, this one was an old one. Okay. No, he said
I was
something.
like,
Was it?
I remember,
I
I
thought it was.
remember he said that,
I
but that
thought.
was a long time
No, I think he
ago.
said something to like he's maybe or a new video was on Earth or maybe.
I mean, it doesn't
Okay, I
shock me.
thought okay, I thought it was
I
something
mean,
new,
if he
but
did,
he
I mean,
did
I'm
say
with
it.
you. I'm okay. Yeah, is it today? Yeah, fuck it, it's today. Yeah, what the fuck he say today, Ron? I'm still here. What did he say?
So, anyways, but yeah, Kilmar. So Kilmar's oops, um, stuck, and so the thing is that then there's gonna start moving towards American citizens
Yep.
because then if you say, well, this American citizen, if you can just say there was a admin mistake, grip me up, say it was an administrative mistake, and send me off to El Salvador, um, and then you say that there's no way to get me back, like
Man, folks need to start stealing off on these plainclothes ICE agents. Fuck that. Fuck it. So someone walking to me in an Avengers t-shirt like they did to Mahmoud Khalil, I'm stealing off. Fuck it. At this point, still off. Like you, they about to arrest you anyway. I don't know
to
you,
send you
motherfucker.
to,
You
but
about to come here.
it's essentially concentration camps, right? I mean,
Yes.
these are like this is like one of the worst prisons in the entire world.
It's a work camp, right? It's a concentration camp.
Torture.
It's a concentration of people who are deprived for political reasons. That is the inherent definition of a concentration. That's why
And
I don't call them plantations. Our ancestors they're on concentration camps.
yeah, and then they're talking about deporting American citizens who are criminals.
Criminals.
But what is a criminal? Someone who
Right.
has said or committed terrorism.
Well, Rom, you can't forget this country to this day. I make sure my son I remind him. I'm like, Ethan, does slavery still exist? He's like, absolutely, Dad, because of the 13th Amendment. So like again, I don't even give him the false pretense that like in 1865 slavery was ended. No, 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 no. We get the 13th Amendment, baby, which says that if you commit a crime, you can still be enslaved. Not a violent crime, not a murderous crime. It says crime, Rom.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say that
Well,
you got to shoot the president. It says crime.
well, that's what everyone
Any
remember these Latinos for Trump and like
Trump.
like my family's fine, like they're not criminals, they haven't done any violent crime,
They're talking about
and
the other ones.
now it's like, oh, they were here, they're criminals, they were here
Oh,
illegally,
me.
they're criminals. Can you imagine?
Oh,
Can you imagine? I mean, these people. I don't even know if some of these people. So first off, this regime is evil, but like, as a
yeah,
normal
no question.
person, Caroline, whatever her name is, Levitt, and Trump are
And
telling you
nothing.
that these people are criminals. Can you imagine just thinking about it for a minute and saying like,
These motherfuckers talking about some criminals.
this woman, let's say she's 60-year-old. I'm just gonna make up, but this is based off of actual people, similar stories. 60-year-old, woman from El Salvador, Venezuela, Mexico, wherever. She's raised kids here. She has a job. She pays taxes, and then y'all, this, you consider her, and she's even here in some way, like legal. Let's just say she's even here. I mean, these people, some of these people are actually
It's
here
documented, man.
with like
There's no
with the
illegal
legal
people,
status, with legal, with
right?
yeah, with legal status, right?
They're
Uh,
documented. Are they documented or not? And then and guess what? Undocumented people get social security numbers. You know why? Because they got to pay taxes.
yes, and so just imagine for a minute saying criminalizing this woman and sending her off to El Salvador concentration camp, this prison, to never be seen again, to never see her family again, to never go back to work again, to never pay taxes again. Just strip her of all of her humanity just because she came here for a better life. Just because she came here to provide for
Probably
her
because
family.
America also destabilized her home country.
It, right. Venezuela. I mean, yes, yes.
Come
South
on.
America.
Come
America's
on.
been running through South America and involved. And this is the chickens coming home to roost. Unfortunately, the people that are paying the price.
I'm always saying that now.
So,
And people don't like that. They're like, could you, this is not America who it is. And like I said with Franklin, like, that's a privilege to say that this is not who America is. America's always disappeared people. America's always put people in camps. America's always, ripped families apart. America's always, I mean, this is,
the mask is off now, right? Like
the mask is
that's the
gone.
mask thing. That's the other thing is like America maintained the facade and the jig pretty damn well
Yes. Hey,
for like they had the whole world kind of full of like this is the Mecca, this is the holy, like this is where this is where everyone has the American dream, and America's the doing the best for everyone. It's like now you're seeing it like, oh,
there was this Chinese influencer that I saw a clip of, and he basically said that China has never pretended to be anything that it was not.
right, yep,
And that's
mhm,
and that's America's problem. Because America has did everything you just said for centuries, right? Still, we're the oldest democracy. It's not a democracy. The democracy is only 60 years old. I try to remind people it's only 60 years old. It's not the oldest democracy. And even that is with a bunch of asterisks because everybody doesn't get to vote. Everybody doesn't get equal share. There's all this gerrymandering and dark money and money. Speaking of all this, get out of here. This isn't a democracy. It's a faux democracy. And when people try to equate humanity and prosperity with America, it's because they are what I say about that Noam Chomsky quote I gave you from episodes ago,
mhm,
that they're so indoctrinated. Because if
mhm.
you really knew what this country was, why would you ever want to support it? Now that does not mean that, as Franklin said, that we will always fight for our people. And I think that's where the white liberal gets messed up because they see us showing up in these places and we're voting. They're like, they care about Madisonian democracy. We care about protecting ourselves from the most violent of y'all.
Mhm.
That's the reality. And until they can grasp that, they're going to continue trying to negotiate and find common ground with folks that would rather kill them than let them breathe free. Not my DNA, brother.
Right.
That's why I say, you know what? I'm gonna do this podcast instead. So, hey, look, because it's just because at a certain, as I said, and I love Franklin's response, but like my question, the James Baldwin question, like, how much time do y'all need? We have survived white supremacy by the skin of our teeth, and we've done so with always with joy, resistance, power, and fighting, and fleeing. But like we can tell you this. Like we could have told them to the minute all this stuff is going to happen. Project 2025. That's been going on since we've been here.
Yeah, exactly. And people have been saying, I mean, we've said it on the podcast, but people have been saying it for. I mean, I look back at things from 10 years ago. The same things exist today. I mean, all of it's history, like you said. It's all history. Like it's all there. That's why they want to dumb down everyone and keep them dumb. And have them rallying around things like "Made in America," and bring back manufacturing
Right.
to America, the America exceptionalism, and we're the best, rah
Bingo.
rah rah. No, it's I think like Franklin said, colleges is the liberation it's colleges is the liberation indoctrinator, right? Like liberate your mind, like not
Not
liberalism, but
your
just
fucking,
like
Oklahoma granddaddy taught me this. Like you're gonna meet. You think you're gonna go meet one of those N words when you go to college.
Yeah.
You realize, oh, they're pretty cool. They're gonna go meet a Muslim person. You're like, oh man, they're pretty awesome. They're gonna
It's
meet a Latino person. They're like, oh, I really like her.
it,
She's beautiful. She's smart. She likes me for who I am. She's taught me new things and taught me different. Then you realize, hold on, my granddaddy was the fucking asshole.
yeah.
That's what they're afraid of.
And
Is because you come into these cultural centers and then you expand your mind.
right. Right. And it's 2025. It's a global world, right? You know, the things that
Right.
disconnected us were the lack of communication, the lack of transportation, the way to trade and move things, the lack of understanding, right? And so many different things. It's like, and so from my lifetime, I felt like there's been progress in terms of uh, relations in a lot of ways. I mean, granted, there's conflict and there's been conflict in many areas of the world, fortunately, but like,
Yeah, for sure.
um, you think about it would be different. I would have a different perspective if it was for the right reasons, right? Because you think about like the United States reliance on technology, which requires chips, which requires rare earth materials, things like that, and the things that are done in order to get those resources, right? The violence that's carried out in where those resources exist.
Right.
Um, and so that will continue to exist. And it's like, well, you talk about all this made in America shit, and it's like, well, you can't do it without the rest of the globe, and you can't do it without
Right.
uh, at the expense of other people's. So it's all, I don't know. It's
No,
very
you're right, man. In fact, ironically, I read this book a couple years ago called It's just sitting right here on the desk, ironically, called
cobalt.
Cobalt Red,
Hmm.
by Siddharth Kara. And you went to the DRC, so I've only
Hmm.
read about it, and and they talk about the artisanal miners, and they're digging up heterodite, right? These ores, and they're doing it barefoot, and it causes cancer. And these ores that contain nickel, uranium, sometimes copper, and of course coltan, right, which they use to make the
Hmm.
chips. And like in the beginning of the book, he has like what GE says about their practices within the DRC, what Tesla says, what Apple says. He's like every company has that. He's like, but then he goes into to prove inside the book because he was on the ground when he wrote this book. It's all a lie.
Hmm.
They have these front shops where they'll have someone in a pressed brand new jumper. They like, oh, you walk in and like that's their inspector. And you're like, well, look, everything is fine, but then the real mine is like 100 miles away, or maybe 25 miles away, with a bunch of shoeless kids digging up, and then they're getting collapsed in on these caves and mines, and the kids are coming out with their limbs all deformed because they're inhaling all of this toxic material. They don't have the right PPE or PPP, or PPE, PPE, not PPP, PPE, and yeah. So it's just like you're right, man. We live in a global society because the thing is trade doesn't respect no fucking nation.
Right.
That's why Trump he had to back down from the electronic devices, because guess what? The device that y'all complaining on about China's like, okay, player, look, we're doing y'all a favor. China is the second largest economy in the world, and they are an economy of exports, right? Like we do commerce with them. That's your Shein and Temu, but it's what they export. We are a consumerist
Hmm.
society, right?
Right.
Like that's the thing about when you are an imperial giant and you do not have to worry about those things, and you ship off the factory jobs, is that you have a bunch of people that cannot do that stuff.
Hmm.
And at least definitely not for sweatshop wages. And on top of that, that guy that we're talking about who was like, "Oh, the terrorists and how dare y'all." I thought he was going to inject the infrastructure. We talked about that on this show about a couple weeks ago. There was no plan to inject the infrastructure to build the factories here for you, stupid. And and that wasn't going to happen. And it wasn't happening during the election.
Right.
That's the only way. And Trump said he's going to do it immediately. So he said he was going to hurt you immediately. But somewhere you believed that it wasn't going to happen to you, right? That it's like, what are you talking? Who told you that?
Yeah. The
Who told you that?
the last thing I kind of leave off with is that this regime has gone in and have made these assumptions that is very myopic in terms of like, this is what we're going to deal with. The game is just tariffs, right? Not thinking about all the other levers that could be pulled by all these different countries at the same time, right? Because
Bingo.
like Japan started pulling their bonds. That's
Yes.
and that's what triggered like Trump to actually be like, okay, and China hasn't even like pulled that lever yet, right? So there's a you know, the carpet that could be pulled, that rug pull could be vicious and literally you know, crash thing. We could go into a Great Depression on the blink of an eye. And the people don't. I don't think people realize, and they were just thinking like, okay, they're like, Trump is
The
just thinking
tariffs
like,
are up, they're
we're gonna
down. We're
operate. Yeah,
good.
we're gonna
We're
operate in the
good
lines
now.
of like, you know, tariff
Yeah.
wars and operate in the normal
Right.
lines. And the
No.
world is realigning, and you know, I think
Rightfully so.
what we could see is, yeah, what we could see is well, it's very unpredictable. So I'm not going to necessarily try to predict it, but you know,
That's it right there.
China's in Africa. China's the one that's
Yeah.
mining they've got their hooks in.
Yeah.
Uh and you know, imagine a world where, you know,
I say,
Africa cuts out.
I just want to say this though, because I think sometimes we do this like we view these countries
Mm-hmm.
these ways too. Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
forget who the person says like um we never really interrogate as especially minority people, but this is Americans, this quote, but why our country is so invested to get us to hate people in another country so much. Right? Like we're like, oh, our enemy is China. Well, China is not the reason that your
Mm-hmm.
schools
Yeah.
aren't invested in. China's not the reason that you're only getting 68 cents on the dollar compared to a white person. China's not the reason that Kyle Rittenhouse can be
Right.
lauded at the RNC. I mean, like
Right.
we were never inter so we hear, oh, I fought in this we fought this war against that group in the Korean War. Like that is not your war. That was not your war to even serve. You know, he's Franklin's talking about his parents were military. My parents were, my dad was military.
Right.
But it's like they will always have the oppressed serving their wars. Hence, this is why you know, Muhammad Ali you know, got his belt taken, right? Because he's like, you can't get me to go kill some other brown person that I don't know who ain't ever pressing me like y'all are pressing me. And that is the problem with this as you're saying, like they got their hooks and stuff. It's like all I'm saying is like I'm not knocking what you're saying, but like why do we hit why wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you do that if you were a superpower? Wouldn't you try to expand and do this? I mean, and that, but the thing is, they don't have military bases everywhere. They're doing it through soft power. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
it through investment because they want to be able to sell to Africa, but to do that, they got to have the roads to get their commerce in. So they're going to build the roads in Africa. We don't want to build the roads in America for Americans. But what we do, we have violent power. We have, like in South Korea, you know, South Korea's military can't do anything without America okaying that shit because we run their military.
Mm.
So if you start to understand, it's like we're just a bully.
Yeah.
American. I say, you hear me doing it now.
Yeah.
This settler colonial project is a bully.
Yeah.
You're not going on that for hours. But.
Yeah.
Anywho'sville.
All right.
Folks, thanks for joining us. Rom kept me on long. I was trying to Rom's
you tried. You tried, but you know what?
It's Rom's fault.
You know what?
Blame Rom.
You know what? I think people need to be saying Kilmar's name. All the Democrats,
Yes.
people need to be. He's just one person, and I'm
Khalil.
sure he's not the only one.
Rumiz Ozturk.
Yeah, and so and the names we've heard are probably not the only ones. I mean, these are regular people.
Sadly, we'll get longer. Sadly,
but you know, I think this administration, somebody's got to hold them accountable. If they're going to buck the SCOTUS, I don't know. I mean, this is where we kind of expected to be honest. If we're being,
I agree.
100%
I agree,
honest.
but it doesn't feel good to be right. And you know, I think I was telling you, or like a few episodes ago, that like I've been right about a lot of this stuff, and not to say I'm like, oh, I'm super right, but like when you study history, you see that this shit they doing. This is why they're trying to get rid of history, so that they can't, so that the population now cannot learn how we beat them in the past.
Right.
So they want to reinvent the wheel. They don't want to listen to the black people. They don't want to listen to the indigenous people. They don't want to listen to the Latino people. Let us. We know Craig. We can work with Mayor Burns. You can't, man. He's a neo-Confederate. He's a neo-Confederate. He doesn't have to say he's neo-Confederate to be a neo-Confederate. And that's the hard part, because again, we had to live in this society for what it is, warts and all, violence and all. And you said that's the one positive thing of Donald Trump getting in office, is that I embrace it. Is that the veil fell? I embrace it, man, and we should embrace it, because now we can at least imagine something bigger,
Hmm.
right? What I said about that momentum in memory, right, is being able to um, problem solve for the right now based on what happened in the past to build a better future for
Yep,
what must come.
absolutely.
Anyway, folks, again, let me do the outro again, Rom.
I'll let y'all go this time.
Thank y'all for listening to the Radical Roots podcast, where we dig deep to reach high, and of course, always progress through action. I am your co-host, Peyron Baxter, signing off.
I am your co-host, Ram Sandoval. Going to bed. Hey, Ron kept me up.
No.